Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
This past week, throughout our Thanksgiving festivities, many of us saw or spoke to our parents and recognized the parts of ourselves that we inherited from them. Many of us saw our children, some of whom are now parents, and reflected on which of our habits and values rubbed off on them. Again and again, we hear that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and yet, most of us do not want to be exactly like our parents. Most of us do not want our children to be exactly like us either. And even so, it is hard to break generations-old habits that we do not want our children to take on. It is hard to reprogram ourselves to think and act in different ways than how our parents taught us to think and act. So much of the Torah outlines that direct line between one generation's traits and values and the next. In Parshat Toldot, Yaakov, or Jacob, deceives his brother Esau, and father Yitzchak, or Isaac, twice. First, Yaakov buys Esau's birthright in exchange for a bowl of lentils, withholding food from his famished brother until the deal is done. Years later, at the command of his mother Rivka, Yaakov dresses up as Esau in order to trick his father into giving Yaakov the coveted firstborn blessing instead. Later, Yaakov's sons will deceive their father as they sell their brother Yosef as a slave and tell their father he was attacked by an animal instead. As he learns from his mother, Yaakov's children inevitably learn to mimic their father's example of how to deceive as a default method of getting what they want. Both biblically and in today's world, whether or not each generation is aware of it, we are inevitably influenced negatively and positively by the actions and the tendencies of those who raised us. The first step to having some degree of control over those actions and tendencies starts with a recognition of them. A comical midrash introduces Yaakov to his tendencies towards deception. On his wedding night, Leah acts the part of Rachel. As soon as Yaakov arises in the morning, he says to her, "Daughter of Lavan the deceiver, why have you deceived me?" And she says to him, "And you? Why did you deceive your father? When he said to you, 'Are you my son Esau?' you said to him, 'I am Esau, your firstborn.' And didn't your father say about you to Esau, 'Your brother came with deceit'?" According to the Midrash, while Leah does not outright deny the deception that she inherits from her father, Yaakov does not seem to recognize the deception that he inherits from his mother. Like Yaakov, so many of us are so determined not to become exactly like our parents that we forget to acknowledge the possibility that we may have already done so. Others of us may not have recognized our parents' tendencies until we relive them as parents ourselves. When we acknowledge what we have inherited, we have the ability to work on ourselves for the sake of both those who spend time with us now and those who come after us. As Yaakov, whose name translates or can translate as deceiver, will one day change his name to Yisrael, or God wrestler. It's never too late to make a shift in our own inherited identity, as Yaakov does. As parents, we each get the power to choose which of our values and strengths we get to prioritize for our kids. As children, we get the power to choose which of our parents' values and strengths we want to embody and pass on to those after us. The ways in which we become like our parents do not have to be inevitable. They can be intentional. When we read the ending of the biblical 13 attributes of God with the stories of Genesis in mind, we can see the passage of personality and baggage from generation to generation as practical warning and encouragement rather than as punishment and reward. God extends kindness to the thousandth generation, our 13 attributes say, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, yet not remitting all punishment, but visiting the iniquity of parents upon children and children's children upon the third and fourth generations. Just because we are not our parents does not mean that we do not carry parts of them that need to be addressed. We get to honor them through what we carry forward from their lives, both learning what to do and maybe what not to do. We get to communicate that learning to our future generations as well so that they can help keep our parents, our ancestors, through Rabbi Torah Chaim, bound up in the bond of life for generations to come. This past week, as we hosted Rabbi Feivel's 2 siblings, their partners, and a grand total of 6 children ages 5 and under in our home, I tried to embody the values of hospitality and family that my parents demonstrated so well when I was growing up. I, too, had 5 cousins on one side who were all within 4 years of one another. Each holiday, Jewish and American, they and their families would fly from all over the country to eat at our table and to stay at our home, since we were the ones closest to Bubby and Papa. This week, in the midst of the chaos of toddlers screaming everywhere, it felt empowering to choose how I want to continue carrying forward my parents' legacy. Even if we are still dealing with some of the challenges we have inherited from 3 or 4 generations past, we also get to remind ourselves of the kindness we have the potential to bring forward for the thousands of future generations to come. Shabbat Shalom.